everyone. We really hope you enjoy this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye.
Today is a very special day because it's our final episode of our first season of Stargate Fandom Podcast.
Woohoo!
We will be very happy to return with the second season of very exciting things, but for today we are concluding our 24 episode arc, and um, I thought we could do something a little bit sort of final and reflective, maybe some revelations. And so we talked before this about picking about three things from the series that we felt really stuck out in specific ways. And I thought we could share those. And then, of course, we have a little fun game prepared for the end. So, would you like to start with one of your revelations, or do you want me to start with one of mine?
Ooh, I think I'll have you start with one of yours, if that's okay.
Okay. So the first revelation I thought of was a character I thought is drastically underused or that I would have liked to have a bigger role in the story. And this is something I was thinking about the other day just because I read something specifically about this character that like someone was theorizing that they were written out for a specific reason. And that's actually Share. This is not one that's really discussed very often as a character that should have been around more, I think because she was written out so early on.
Mhm.
And when you're watching it, it doesn't necessarily feel like the arc is overly short, especially if you don't know how many seasons there are. But
Yeah.
considering that there were really 10 seasons and that um Share was only really present, and I had looked it up the other day and I saw 4 episodes. And I thought that was very, very small. And the biggest reason why I was thinking, oh, well, this is actually a bit strange, and um, is the amount of episodes that Apophis was in. And I mean, I think you could also say it's the same with Skara to some sense, because although there were a few more episodes with Skara and his trajectory was longer, but with Apophis, Apophis was present for 5 seasons and was constantly appearing as like this main villain and was so present, and Share basically became his partner. And so I'm really surprised that even some other system lords had more screen presence than Share, given Share's function in the story. So that's something that I was thinking about, and I thought, oh, it's really kind of, when you actually reflect on it, it's a bit shocking how little role that character played in the story, considering how pivotal they actually were. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I never even thought of her. That's a really good one. I agree. Like, and what's interesting too is how you mentioned that you noticed how little that character was actually in, and I found that when I was trying to think of things that stood out to me or characters that maybe I wanted to see more of and things like that. That seemed to be like a constant like thought in my mind of a lot of different like characters where I would think back and think, okay, like this character had a really cool like storyline that could have been explored more. And in fact, I
Mm-hmm.
think, a lot of kind of my ideas of what I wrote down of kind of like things that stood out to me have to do with characters and me thinking that they need to be like seen more or explored more of their
That's
characters.
funny,
So
me too.
yeah, because like as soon as I think of one character that I'd be like, well, really, they were only in this, and like, they could have explored more with this, and like then I think of another character that they did the same thing with. So I've probably honestly like written down more than 3, but maybe that's okay in the sense that, like, I don't feel like I have a huge amount to say specifically about each one. It's more of like,
Hmm.
it kind of, like, stood out to me in terms of, like, maybe wanting to see a certain character more or whatever. So I find that interesting with what you said about Sheree because that's so true, and that I don't know why she never entered. I mean, it's good that she didn't even come to my mind. because then it would have been the same as your choice, but, like but yeah, that's interesting. So should I say one of the
Yeah,
things that
say
kind of
yours.
let's see, one of the okay, this is probably actually maybe a popular one that other people probably feel. Um, that I feel there could have been much more of the storyline of Dr. Lamb and explaining, like, her
Yes.
background and maybe even doing, like, special episode where it's, like, showing her before she was, working with her dad at Stargate Command um, and, like, showing their like, maybe stuff that happened within their relationship, her and her dad, like, going back in time, I think, would have been interesting, as well as her character just in the present time that she was in there, and, like, I feel like I was expecting there to be more with her character similar to what they end up doing in Atlantis with Dr. Keller, like, I feel like they really explore some of it, and I know we're not necessarily mentioning Atlantis, so that's I'm just kind of comparing it in terms of
Mhm, mhm.
how they in Atlantis, I feel like there's a lot of, like, characters that are considered side characters that they really have time to kind of shine and explore, like, who they are and things within that character. There might be an episode where it really, like, shows how they would react in a situation or whatever, and I feel like with Dr. Lamb, I just feel like at first it seemed like they were going to have her more in the show, and then I felt like she just kinda disappeared for a good portion of the rest of Stargate once she was in. So I would have liked to see more with her character and her relationship with her dad, um, and stuff, so but that could have maybe been more of a popular opinion, I'm not sure if because I know a lot of people really liked her character, right? So, yeah, so that's
Yeah,
what
I'd
I
be
came up with.
curious. I'd be curious if other people write in the comments if that's a popular opinion. But I agree with you because I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of untapped potential with the fact that she's working for her dad and also untapped conflict potential. And I know they kind of resolved the conflict super early on, really, when you think about how much interaction they had. But I would have loved to see, I mean, and I know part of that is probably the show was ending. But imagine if they had more seasons and then they could kind of like push the tension a little bit more between them
Yeah.
before kind of resolving it. I mean, especially I thought it was really great when they had Sam's relationship with her dad kind of come to the show,
Mhm.
and so I actually really liked that, and then that they brought in the whole family dynamic. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, and when you think about it, you're right because even Dr. Frasier had a really, really like eventually got a strong arc. I mean, I don't know when they brought in Dr. Frasier, if it was intended to be more of a primary character, but it was very quick that Dr. Frasier became a real primary character, I think because it was necessary for like
Mhm.
the work they're doing and also because people really liked her.
Yeah.
And she got such a like a completely heartfelt conclusion, and it's the same with Dr. Beckett and Dr. Keller from Atlantis, that I also
Mhm.
felt like they were given that. So I think of all of them, yeah, Dr. Lamb kind of got the least screen time and the least development, even though her character is super interesting. So
Yeah.
I would totally agree with you there. And yeah, I should add just for listeners, we basically chose these things from SG-1 only because we are not completely done with Atlantis and we are not done. I haven't started Universe yet. I am at the end, getting to the end of season 4 of Atlantis.
Yeah, let's see, where am I? I'll check my little app to see where I'm at with Atlantis. Yeah, I think I just yeah, okay. So I had just finished the last episode of season 4 for Atlantis,
Ooh.
and with the watch, with the list of stuff that I'm following it on an app. So then the next thing apparently I should watch is the movie that's the Arc of
Mm-hmm.
Truth.
The
So
Arc of Truth.
that will be the one that I will be watching that I haven't watched yet before I go on to season 5 of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah, I think I just saw Harmony. I just saw Harmony from season 4. So I'm a little bit behind. But yeah. So I'll say
um
my second one,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is a race I thought was longer involved in the story. So again, mine are all character people focused too. I actually made that observation. I thought all these have to do with people or characters or things and not
Yeah.
necessarily plot devices. Um, the Tolan. And, that's because, like, in a way, they were there for, I think, a few episodes, but actually not very many, and I thought it really could have been something that could have been explored longer,
Yeah.
um, especially when you consider in Atlantis, they had this kind of conflict with the Genii, and it was more of a conflict really than a and it lasted and it went on and on, and they I mean, at least at the part of the story I'm in, the Genii are still playing a part.
Mhm.
And so already that's 4 seasons worth, and I think the Toland, they were really only present in, I think, maybe 3 episodes. And if I
Yeah.
remember right, one was only I mean, there was a lot of them were not necessarily focused on the Toland. There was only the first one and the final one that were really focused, and I don't think they need to have necessarily more Toland focused episodes, but I think it would have been really cool to explore more their relationship, and then also that could open up relationships with others.
Yeah.
Um, but also this sort of friendly conflict that sometimes they would get along and sometimes they wouldn't. And um, also that it could be a situation in which both of them kind of learn a little bit from each other. Because I
Mhm.
think that's something where, their reflections on sort of so-called what they called as primitive, like kind of made us look at ourselves, but I think also some of their I mean, I felt like it was kind of a too quick conclusion that was very, in a way, kind of didn't do them necessarily justice, especially since
Yeah.
they were so advanced. I don't really necessarily think they would just go towards that, and it could have been a longer conflict with the fracturing and other things, and I think that could have been very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I'd actually thought initially about writing them down too, but I didn't. So, so far we've picked different ones, but I almost did. I almost did for a lot of those similar reasons. So, um, yeah, I think too. It's like there's so much in Stargate. Like I think they do really well with kind of packing it with a lot of things going on, a lot of characters, and all sorts of different things that, especially with there being so many seasons of SG-1,
Mhm.
I think it was really hard to kind of think back of just a few things that, um, could be expanded upon or whatever. Like as soon as I think of one thing, then I think of another thing. And
Yeah.
so I can kind of see how it's more of like a looking back kind of thing. It makes sense to expand further with certain characters or whatever, or races of people or whatever. But I can see how like in time, whenever however they do it with the process of the writers, I can see maybe how why they space things out the way they did, and maybe not focus so much on certain, like, things that we're now bringing up, but, um, it definitely would have been cool, I think, to kind of expand further so far on the ones that we've mentioned, but I can
Yeah.
see how, like, maybe in the time of writing it, why maybe that wouldn't have stood out to them to do. So,
I wonder if that's partially because of the era, because I noticed, like, with the Janai, they do not kill them off, just in case they can come back, and I think that's something more common with, like, TV now, that they do want things to be so returning and returning, and with the Tolan, it was like it was so final, they were all wiped out. I mean, they could have just been there and then they don't show up, then that door's open, but it's, like, kind of, like,
yeah.
because I guess maybe the mindset or the thinking was more on creating something impactful for an episode rather than necessarily thinking always long term, which I think shows tend to do more now. They're more about continuity than, individual things.
Yeah, that's a
So
good point.
it could be an era thing, which, I mean, I think it's also very interesting to observe that, because as I, when I bring it up, and I think with some of the things to bring up, oh, they did this, like, they do these things in Atlantis, and then I think, yeah, Atlantis, it makes sense. It's later, so people tend to like things coming back and back and back, whereas maybe before it was
Yeah,
all more novelty driven, and it wouldn't matter if you killed off this race because it's
yeah.
the another one will pop up.
Yeah, it's interesting when things change due to, like, whatever time period that, like, things are being filmed,
Yeah.
and I know this goes off topic of what we were talking about, but it came to mind, so I just wanted to see your thought, is one thing I noticed when I started Atlantis, and I know it's a different composer too, but, like, at least I think it is that
Mm-mm,
I felt
it's
is
the
it
same.
not? Is it the same
Same.
composer?
I believe so, yeah. I thought
Oh.
so. I really thought so. But maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought so.
I thought it
Maybe
was a
it is.
different one, but, I noticed a very, like, noticeable shift with the music.
Yes,
which
yeah.
I really liked, but I noticed a noticeable shift with little things about that they either did with the music or just the sound of it. Like it still has that very Stargate sound, but like I definitely noticed like a noticeable shift as soon as I started Atlantis. And
Yes.
so I think it
Yes, for
all is
sure.
due to the time period as well.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a different composer, a different time period, but yeah, I think you're right because I noticed that the music I actually just noticed this the other day when there was something in Atlantis, and I thought the music is scoring this in a much more dramatic way than SG-1 would have. And I know part of that is because at the time of SG-1, the soundtracks were a little bit more just character themes and lighter and not with this sort of so dramatic that I think was part of the time. So I
Mhm.
noticed that specifically the other day. It was very interesting that you mentioned that.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, I think at some point I will just mention all of the ones I have listed if we have time. But so I was trying to think of like uh the bad guys, the bad characters and any of my thoughts on any of that. And someone that kind of stuck out in my mind that I would have liked to know more about like was the system lord you, like why you, like you. um
Ah, you yeah, you're right.
um because I don't know, there's always been something about that particular character that when they have been in the episodes, which I feel like sometimes it was just like little snippets of that character, and then there was times when it was more like a plot like involving that particular character. Um, I feel like it could be interesting, and really with any of the Goa'ulds, like I feel like it could be interesting to have had something that went. Again, I keep thinking back in time and then in the present, like, if it goes back in time far enough to, like, almost see before that person before that uh, human, right, was, like became a Goa'uld, right? Because, like, all
That
of
would be
them
so cool.
yeah, all of them at one point, were just regular people, right?
Yep.
And then became a host, and so, um I thought that could be interesting, but I just also feel like with that particular one, like I think later on they have this stuff happening where he seems very forgetful.
Yep.
Um and I feel like that could have all been expanded further. There could have been more like into his story that I just think could have been interesting. And so when thinking of like Goa'ulds, like I forget the full name, I just wrote down you, you
Yeah.
system lord,
Yeah, I
and
think it's just
so
Lord You, yeah.
yeah, that's one that kind of stuck out to my mind because I was also thinking, was it Apophis that they
Mhm.
had that thing happen on his deathbed where
Yes, yeah.
his the
The
human host,
host.
and that was so like
Powerful, yeah.
yeah, so powerful and like that I think it could have been really interesting to kind of explore that with other goals and stuff. And so with you, I think with how they kind of had like a storyline there that I think was more prominent later on. Like sometimes you just see them every now and then with the other system lords that there wouldn't be
Yeah.
too much that I remember at least of that character. So yeah, that's one that I thought with that.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think You is a very underrated system lord, and I
Hmm.
think had a very interesting and nuanced trajectory, and I really love nuanced trajectories. Like, if I remember right, there were times when, like, Lord You actually helped them and, like, not out of a weirdness. So I think there were so many layers to that character specifically.
Yeah.
Even like you have the layer of that, they're saying he's getting forgetful, and is he really getting forgetful, or is he not, or is it part of like, and then he was also kind of in a way at some points he was a little bit helping the Towery because yeah, it partially benefited him or the other Goa'uld, but I mean also I felt like there were just a lot of layers to that character, and there was something about that particular system lord that I thought they really could have. I mean, it could have been a larger player in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would agree with you. I would have liked to see more Lord You and have a little bit more in-depth development with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your other? choice?
So my final one, and this actually came from, I saw a survey about this on a Stargate Reddit group, and it is the character I think that they did the dirtiest with writing them out of the show or killing the character off, and that would be Jonas Quinn.
Ah, okay.
I think that his sort of departure was probably in SG-1, it was probably one of the most kind of the departure itself was anticlimactic. He wasn't killed off spectacularly. There wasn't necessarily a big reason for the character itself to leave, other than that Daniel came back.
Mhm.
And so I thought that it was kind of unceremonious in a way.
Mhm.
And it kind of felt like it just made the situation that it fit so that he could go, so that Daniel could take his place. And I always thought it was very unfortunate because, I mean, especially later on, I mean, Vala comes in and then Vala ends up being kind of a main character in the show. So it's not unheard of that they could have kept somebody around. And I don't think they necessarily needed to keep him around like on the SG-1 team, but it could have been really cool to keep him there like as a scientist or something. And so I thought in terms of that particular send off, I thought it was a bit of a disappointment. I mean, I know there's Frasier was probably the most tragic, like character being taken out of the series, but I also thought that's not really her departure wasn't really her being done dirty because it really honored the character. It was really like, I mean, Heroes
Yeah.
is such a like one of the best
Yeah.
episodes of like ever, and so I think it's really doing the character like even though it's killing them off, it's doing them a good service. But I think like where Jonas is kind of like unceremoniously gone, I don't know that it makes sense for the character itself.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that Jonas brought something a little bit positive and kind of like different vibe that wouldn't have been such a bad thing to kind of keep
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. No, I'm smiling because I had actually written down almost that exact thought. That was one of the
Really?
things I wrote down, I mean, I
Really?
think you always have a great way of explaining yourself far better than I do, I think, but yeah, you basically took my thoughts out of my head with that one, basically, I had written down, that, where is it? That I mean, I just kind of wrote little quick notes so that I could remember like what I wanted to mention. So that was one of them. So that was one of them where I wrote like that I felt they should have kept Jonas Quinn around and that um have him be even if it was just kind of like not part of the main team, but like a regular in the series
Yes. Yeah.
where like they would go to him to help like figure out maybe certain sciencey things, him and Daniel
Like
could work
Zelenka,
together. Exactly. Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah, and I feel like I really loved Jonas Quinn. Like, I think, like, it was such, like, a nice character that somehow, in my opinion, kind of flawlessly fit in to SG-1, and then it's great to have Daniel back, but I don't feel like they needed to have Jonas Quinn leave in order to do that. I felt like that was really
Yep.
unfair to the character and to the actor.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I
It's
just
like
feel
your
like
replacement's here, you're gone.
yeah, I felt like that the whole situation was just a bit unfair because I really thought the character worked so well, like, with everyone, and I think there was enough differences with that character that I feel they could have had him always be there, not necessarily if, sometimes they could be kind of there similar to what a main character would be. Maybe there'd be a certain storyline going on where he'd really be helping them with something and joining them going somewhere. And then other times, maybe more of a back seat where they're just, kind of working with him to help with some sort of like situation that they can't quite figure out, because I think that could have worked nicely. And I think it's a shame
Mhm.
that they didn't think to do that because it did kind of feel like oh, Daniel's gone, like don't know if he's coming back, so we'll bring in someone to try and fill his place and oh, Daniel wants to come back now, so let's toss out Jonas
Yeah.
Quinn,
Bye, yeah,
At least that's how
yeah.
it felt.
Right, and I honestly think, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe if it was a little bit later and Atlantis was already kind of started and they had already this paradigm of, like, extra characters that are not part of the main 4, because I think something that Atlantis does a bit better than SG-1 is that element, this sort of characters that aren't part
Definitely.
of the main one, but they're there, and I understand, like, that's the paradigm of that show. It was developed in the '90s when that was probably more what was expected, and, yeah, there was a lot of change in how shows were done over that 10 years, and so I think that's something that could have yeah, that could have been really, really cool, especially because you get different than character dynamics, like, something I recently, a couple episodes ago was the quarantine episode from Atlantis, and
Mhm.
I actually like, one of my favorite parts of that episode was Carter and Zelenka, which is, like,
Yeah.
a dynamic you wouldn't like, that was one of my favorite parts of that, and then at the end, that Zelenka kind of gets, like, credit for everything, and, like, I thought it was so cute and, like, honest, like, their interaction was, like, so real, like, and
Yeah.
so I love that kind of thing, and I think sometimes when you introduce new characters, I mean, even if they're not there all the time, sometimes you get those cute little new interactions, and then you get to
Yeah.
see that sometimes, and to me, I really like that, like
Yeah. I mean, I think supporting actors is what makes helps make a full storyline.
Yeah, totally.
If it's just about the main characters interacting all the time, like you need to have the supporting actors, like to help like add things to the story and make it interesting. And yeah, I fully agree that like that's what Atlantis I feel does, significantly better than SG-1 is they really allow the supporting cast to shine and to have their moments where it makes sense and it works and it
Mhm.
just makes the story I think more enjoyable. So um yeah. So do you want me to say like some of my other ones since one of mine was the
Yes.
same as
Yes.
yours? Let's see. So I mean, I could just like read off what I have if you want, unless I mean, you might also come up with other ones as we go because I think this is kind of went through kind of quickly somewhat. So one of the characters, okay, so that I thought could have been interesting to have somehow more stories to just solely because I really love this actor. And I love this character was the character of Marty. The
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
the alien, right? Yes. Yes.
The yeah, and how initially they had it where, he didn't like he was like a conspiracy theorist and then they find out that he actually was from like an alien planet, right? And then like he was given stuff like drugs or whatever to be forgetful and all these things and then like I know like they had his character in there multiple times, but then basically it ended up ending where I think that character ended up just then living on Earth or something after they realized that their planet had been destroyed and they just
Mhm.
kind of lived on Earth and that was it. Like I just love that character so much because I also just really love that actor so much. I'm so sad that the actor in real life passed away, but quite a few years ago. But like I just think it could have been fun because he added an element of, like, a silly element, a funny
Yeah.
element, to it that could really make any story, regardless of how maybe chaotic or crazy something was that was going on that was kind of a heavy topic. They could have added that character in somehow
Yeah.
and, like, just lightened it up a little bit, like, I don't know. So that was one that I thought would be really awesome to have, like, more of a story with, like, based around that character. So, um, and
Yeah, no,
then
I agree with you. I love Marty.
yeah, yeah, I just love that character so much. In fact, when I was starting the rewatch, it's like this was my second time watching Stark SG-1, right? And so I remember when I was first starting, I always remembered that character, like, even though it was
Really?
so long ago when I had first watched Stargate, and I remember always wondering,
Wow.
"Well, when is that character coming up?" Like, I always remembered him. So that must have stood out to me back then too.
Totally.
And then then when I was thinking of Marty, then I was just like, "Oh, well, that makes me think of, like, other characters that add an element of humor," because I personally love when there's, like, humor involved in
Me
episodes,
too.
like,
Me too.
I find that those are usually some of my favorite episodes. I find that if it's episodes that are just really heavy all the time, while I love all those storylines, sometimes it's a bit too much for me, and then I need
Yeah.
something that has an element of humor to it. Um, and so I was thinking of, I'm not sure if pronounced their last names right, but the 2 scientists, Felger and Coombs.
Yes,
Is Felger, is
100%.
that how I say his last name?
I
Felger?
think so. I think so.
And I just feel like there could be so much more explored, like, with those 2.
Totally,
Like
totally. I 100% agree.
both together, they were hilarious, and then separately as well, like, I would have loved to see them in more, you know? Like, even, like, having, like, and in fact, when I was thinking about all these, and I know there's so much more to this for things to be successful, but when I was thinking about all of, like, the little side characters that I love and would love to see more of, I'm just like, "Dang, there's so many, like, spin-offs they could have done."
I know, right? Actually, when you brought it up about the hosts, like, I was thinking, yeah, there could totally be, like, a prequel type spin-off, like, of Goa'uld before they were Goa'uld, and then also, like, their
Yeah.
ascent to power, like, start following the host first, and then they're becoming a Goa'uld, and then from becoming, like, sort of like a minor, like, not player to, like
Yeah.
how did Anubis become Anubis? Like, what was he
Yeah.
before, you know?
Yeah, and they could have it where each season is, like, solely based on, like, the storyline of 1 or 2 Goa'ulds, and then the next season they focus on others similar to, I don't know if you ever watched watch Bridgerton, but I love Bridgerton, and, like, the way they do it is interesting because they always have couples that are the focus each season.
Oh,
So
cool.
after they're the focus, they're no longer the focus
Mhm.
continuing on. And so, like,
Oh,
people
that's
that
cool.
like watching that show, it's always like an excitement, like, who are they going to talk about, like, whose storyline is going to be the main storyline, and they shift and change that. And so that could be cool with Goa'ulds, like, shift and
Totally.
change their storyline, have it be, like, it's really focused on, like, one until the end of then when they become a Goa'uld, and that could be really cool. So they need to pay
That
us
could
the big bucks to get that idea, yo.
Yeah, I know, we're getting all these ideas out there. Yeah, I mean, there's, like, an infinite amount of like, sort of material that you could create so many spin-offs with in this situation. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could make a spin-off with Felger and Coombs. It would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like, you could also kind of make it in a way serious because they would always get in these situations, and it could be, like, a lot of times they're rescued by SG teams, but, yeah, it could be a lot of times they figure out how to get out on their own or something. It could be really cool.
Yeah, and there's something about actors this is gonna sound so stupid. There's something about actors, that are funny, that when they have, like, the crazy eye look, I love them, and
Yeah, me too.
what I mean by that is, so if you think of, like, Steve Carell or
Mhm. Yeah.
Ellen DeGeneres, whenever they're funny and silly, they get this crazy look in their eye.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
they like and I noticed that in the actor that played, I think it was Felger. Is he the one that was the brown-haired brown? Because there was a one with the massive hair, or was that, which one was
I
which?
think I think the one with, like, the bigger hair was Coombs.
Coombs, yeah, so Felger, he, for some reason, his face reminds me of Steve Carell.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely,
when, like, silly
100%.
things would happen, like, I felt like he got that same crazy eye look.
100%.
Um
Totally.
Let's see. I think I had a few other things written down. Yeah, so just a few things, like, and I think I've maybe kind of mentioned these before in other things we've talked about. So, um, maybe I'll list just the last bits first, and then you can let me know what you think about all of it. So one of them was going more into the recruits, like when they did the recruits, the
Yes,
younger cast. I think that could have been
100%.
really fascinating to go more into their stories because I really liked the few characters that they had there. And then they
Me
only had
too.
like an episode or two with them. And so it would have been nice to have more of that. Also, I think it could have been nice to, like, revisit. the clone of O'Neill that's the kid. Like, I
Yes.
think, like, it could have been really fascinating to and that would have also been a cool spin-off, but it could have been really
Mhm.
fascinating to, like, have his character, maybe even have that character of the young O'Neill be going to the same school as Cassie or something and have the 2
That
of
would be
them.
amazing. Oh
Like,
my
that
gosh.
yeah, that could be awesome. And then, the final thing I also wrote was just about, like and I guess that my question to you would be, like, what storyline that were you glad was over? So for me, it was the Jaffa being free. Like, I was glad that, it's like, it's all, like, for through most of SG-1, it's all about Teal'c trying to change the minds of the Jaffa and changing the minds of, you know, not following a god and all of that. And then it switches to the bad guys of the Ori, and at least I think it's like shortly after that. That for me, it's like I know how important like that storyline is. It's just I honestly got kind of sick of it. Like, I just not that I ever got sick of the show, I got sick of, like, the idea behind, like, that constant fight for freedom that never seemed to be, and while I understand that in a real life situation, that's probably how it would be, it's not gonna be an easy fix, to change people's minds, so that's exactly how it would be and makes sense, it's just, for me, I was so happy once that focus changed.
Right. Well, also, I have to say, like, I enjoyed more watching the complications once the Jaffa had their freedom and they had to set up a political system.
Mhm.
Like, it's funny because another show I've watched is like it's like the opposite, which is Spartacus. The way that they kind of try and get the freedom, it's like the whole focus of an entire season, and it's so perfectly done. Like, it is so perfectly done, like, how everything is intertwined and the political maneuvering and how it ends up coming to be at the very end, it is perfectly done. But I feel like the opposite situation, like, as soon as they get the freedom and then everything is big, it's like suddenly the show like it's a little bit more unrealistic in terms of like how far and how wide they can go in a given place. Plus it's more difficult to incorporate. So it was still like good, it was fine, but the way that they did the getting to the freedom was so perfectly done. And I think with this, like I would say I actually found it more interesting the storylines once they had politics of their own. And I mean, I would say of that, like, I'm trying to think, like, what thing could I have been glad it was over? I mean, I wouldn't say I'm glad like, was glad that it was over, but I was kind of disappointed in the way that the Tok'ra storyline played out overall. Like
Yes, yeah,
like,
I agree.
I mean, I understand that they had a different sort of like feeling about everything. And I know that already from the get-go, they were kind of suspicious of like the Tauri and they had their feelings about certain things. But I kind of feel like by the end, it was sort of Jacob was almost isolated from them and they kind of all went in this different direction. And I just feel like that's a little bit unrealistic.
Mhm.
And I was also kind of disappointed because I wanted more from them. I wanted them it's almost like because they didn't wanna always have the Tok'ra involved, they kind of started writing them into a situation where they were not overly friendly and didn't necessarily trust the Tauri, and so I think that could have been done a little bit differently. That's maybe I was a little bit disappointed about how that turned out.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but now that you bring it up, I feel that I do feel the same with that because it did feel like, looking back at it, it did feel like it was kind of like this sudden shift that seemed
Yeah.
like because it seemed like the relationship with the Tok'ra was getting better and then all of a sudden it just completely shifted.
Mhm.
And yeah, it did kind of seem like maybe the intention was to just kind of get them out of the picture. Um, but yeah, it's always
Mhm.
interesting, I think, when we talk about things like this with storylines and characters and stuff, because like I think it'd be so fascinating to talk with like the writers of the show
Mhm.
because I would love to know, like, that process if they even remember. Maybe they don't wouldn't remember, but, how they decide these kinds of things in terms of, like, what storylines to go to, what not to go with, like, what were they thinking for certain reasoning behind stuff, like, it'd be really interesting to, like, know about, like, but I don't know
Totally.
about you, but, like, when it comes to, like, composing music, for example, sometimes when I'm in the zone. But then once I'm out of the zone and I'm asked to sometimes explain my process, I don't always remember my process. Like it's almost like I go through like an amnesia where I don't fully remember everything. So I wonder like if like with writers and stuff, like there's so much writing that goes on and it's probably such a collaborative process with other writers, I would imagine. And then
Oh
and
yeah,
then things probably need to get changed based off of feedback they get from other departments, like, that I
totally.
wonder if they would even remember, like, why they changed something, the reasoning behind something, the reasoning for having the Tok'ra go out, like,
Yeah, that's true, and how much of it is,
yeah.
like, completely not relate like, I mean, we both mentioned, like, Dr. Lamb, but I am 100% certain, or maybe not 100%, but I'm fairly certain that the reason the character wasn't more present in those seasons is because of maternity leave, for example.
Oh, okay.
So, I think there's
Yeah,
also always these practical things that, I mean, we probably wouldn't even think about,
yeah,
um, but that exists. I mean, so I think that there's this kind of thing, and who knows what else is going on, or if there's sort of weird inner politics, or maybe an actor they're working with doesn't want to do it anymore, or I mean,
yeah,
so who it's very hard to say.
yeah.
Um, so
It's
I mean, I
very
would be
different,
interested too,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very different from, like, say, someone just writing a book, right? Where they have
Yep,
all the control of where the storyline goes. So, I'm sure that probably maybe makes sense as to why certain things maybe felt like, it was a little disappointing how things ended or, characters were just, like, gone, Like, it very well could just be the practical elements of things happening or studios deciding what direction they want something to go in, and they have to follow that. So, yeah, that is interesting, but I think it's cool that we both kinda came up for the most part with different things that kinda stood out to
totally.
us. Um
Yeah,
I think it'd be really cool for those listening, either on YouTube or Spotify. Now Spotify has a comment section. They kind of changed it up. I know most people watch us on YouTube, but if anyone is on Spotify, then feel free to like leave comments too about like um, you know, what were the moments that stood out to you? Like what would you want like done differently and everything? Like that'd be really fascinating to hear like other people's takes on it or if they agree with some of the stuff that we've mentioned. But anyways, so now like we had came up with questions, right? Like well, what would we rather kind of questions, just kind of as like a
yeah, like
silly
the
ending.
coffee or tea Stargate version. Um, so how about I'll just my first question, Goa'uld or Ori?
Mm, or I.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I would say this is tough. I love the Goa'uld. It's hard picking, okay? I love the Goa'uld. Like, I think they were such a fantastic enemy, but I really love like the higher stakes of the Ori. So I kind of
Hmm.
like, I guess like both of them I feel like were best in their particular part of the story. But
Yeah.
I mean, I guess overall, because like it's closer to the end, I guess I'll pick Ori because that's the most temporally proximate to me or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to pick. I love them both.
Yeah, I do love them both, and I kind of wonder, like, if our answer would be different if the Ori were at the beginning of Stargate and then the Goa'uld came later on. Like, I wonder,
Yeah,
like, would that make us then be like, oh, well, that's, a little bit of a
totally.
change up, maybe then we pick Goa'uld. So, yeah, I think you're right. Like, they're both great, but if I had to pick right now, I would say Ori.
Ori, yeah.
Did you want me to say one of mine now? Okay, so I don't know if I did this right, so mine aren't, like, fully just, like, one, like, word, but, like, basically
Some of mine aren't either. Some of
Oh,
mine are like
okay.
more longer.
Okay, so would you rather be, forever be stuck with Ergo in your mind or be stuck in a 10-hour time loop?
Oh man, Ergo. I mean,
Yeah.
like, this is kind of it's kind of a tough one because, like, I know, yeah, if you have Ergo forever, there's somebody that's gonna be influencing your decisions forever, but at least you could live out your life. Like, the
Mhm.
10-hour time loop on the one hand, it would be really cool because you would basically but, like, nothing you would do would have any impact on anything, and I think that would be
True.
very difficult. So, like, if the worst thing that happened to me is that somebody would try and convince me to eat pie, and maybe I could overcome that after some time, I could be like, "No, I don't wanna eat pie," um, then maybe Ergo's not so bad. If Ergo was just convincing me to drink coffee, it would be okay, probably.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I could tell Ergo, like, "It has to be a healthy diet, okay?"
I don't think Ergo would listen.
Yeah,
But
or what about you?
I think I would be Ergo. Like, when I was writing this one, I'm like, "Okay, of course, everyone's gonna probably pick Ergo if given the option." But the reason why I was thinking, like, it could be a questionable choice is because if you really think about it, having someone constantly there, being almost like this, like, as much as I love Ergo, like, I would probably love to, be a dork with Ergo. Like where you're hearing him go like singing and doing like getting all excited with things. But like um to have that forever be there, I could imagine it. I think with both of these options, it could drive you to insanity either way. I think probably the 10-hour time loop would drive you to insanity quicker. Ergo, you know, yeah, I would choose Ergo. But what I was thinking with the 10-hour time loop is kind of like when that happened to O'Neill, it was
Mhm.
like he was able to kind of just like do all the things he ever wanted to do and be reckless with things and be
That's
silly.
true.
And then like so at first like you might just like live your life as normal and then you might just be like, fuck it, I'm gonna try doing this. Oh God, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, I keep forgetting.
Demonetized.
I need to bleep myself. I've been doing so well with not swearing on this podcast too. I haven't had to put up an explicit warning in a while. Um, but like, so that side could be appealing is just being able to kind of repeat things in a way that you kind of like test out trying things in a different way, interacting with people in a different way or situations. But I guess over time you would kind of get sick of it as well. So, um yeah. So I would pick Ergo as well. Okay, what
Yeah,
was
but I
your
guess I
what?
guess in the 10-hour time loop, because you're always going back, right? So technically in the 10-hour time loop, you could eat all the pie without all the repercussions. Like,
Ah, true.
so maybe
True.
the key is to like have Ergo and the 10-hour time
Oh my god.
loop.
That would be something.
Okay. Okay, here's one. Would you rather have to deal with the Jedi or the Ashen?
Oh wait, who are the Ashen? I know that makes me a horrible Stargate person, but I can't think of who
Um,
they are.
they are the ones that were in 2010 and 2011, I think, where they were the ones that created the sterility vaccine.
Oh. Oh, wow. Okay. Um, so sorry, what was your question?
Would you rather have to deal with the Jedi or the Ashen?
Oh my gosh, I don't know, because 'cause they're both very awful in different ways.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Part of me almost feels like it would be more straightforward with having to deal with the Janai. Um, I don't know why, because I have to pick one. Um, that's a tough one. I'm having a hard time answering that one. Maybe
It's
the
ex
Janai.
it's extremely tough. I would probably lean more towards the Jedi too, just because they're pesky and annoying. But usually it's just dealing with them on a fighting level, like
Yeah,
military. The
yeah,
Ashen are kind of sneakier. On the other hand, I think the Ashen are more apt to like they're not so outwardly aggressive. So as
yeah,
long as you kind of avoid their schemes, you avoid them. So in that sense, the Ashen would be
yeah,
better. But I think the Jedi are more transparent.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think
that's a
that's why I was leaning towards that as well because I was
Jedi.
thinking, yeah. Yeah, thinking of more of like your typical like you fight them kind of thing versus like being manipulated constantly.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Mhm.
Okay, so my next one was, would you rather be trained to fight by Ronin or by Teal'c?
Ooh, that's such a tough one because Ronin was like trained for survival, right? So
Hmm.
if you were trained by Ronin, you could survive in any situation. But I feel like Teal'c overall probably has much more train in actual combat, like in terms of combat.
Hmm.
So I guess the question would be more, do I want to be trained to fight or do I want to be trained to survive? And so in that
Mm.
sense, I would probably pick Ronin
Okay.
because I would want to be trained to escape and run away rather than fight. That would maybe be my
Right.
answer.
Oh, that's a good reasoning. I think I would probably pick Teal'c because I was thinking
Mhm.
about both of their like fighting styles and how um how with Teal'c uh there's a calmness with him that he seems a little bit more clear-headed with how he's able to approach things, and he kind of like analyzes it in a way and keeps his self like it's like because he was used to having the symbiote or whatever, and like prior to that being taken out. And oh, have I frozen? Because you froze for a second.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
No, you're
okay.
good.
And he was used to, going into, what was it called? Kalnorim or whatever, deep meditations and
Right.
stuff. And so I feel like
Right.
even though like he later on doesn't always, he doesn't have the need to do that, I feel like there's something about the way his mind works where I feel like he would teach like that mental ability as well as the physical. Whereas I feel like Ronan kind of just like gets angry and he just like goes. Like, he just kind of like fights and sometimes isn't always clearly thinking about what's going to happen due to his actions because he gets so riled up.
True.
So that
True.
would be my reasoning behind, picking Teal'c.
That's such a good point. That's a really good point. Plus also, I mean, in a way, like Tilk is also older, so in that sense of like the mind and the development,
Yeah,
like I forgot about that aspect that he would, so that makes it even more difficult, I guess, because like
yeah.
I would love to learn also this aspect. But yes, on to the next one. The next one, original human replicators or Atlantis human replicators.
So original human replicators?
Like the SG-1 human replicators or Atlantis human replicators. What would you pick?
I think I would pick, like, the original human replicators. Um, I feel like the other ones in Atlantis, like, they're far more advanced at that point, I think, and sneaky. And,
True, yeah, they're very sneaky.
so I feel like in a sense they're more powerful, and so I don't know if you're referring to, would you want to like, do you just prefer one or the other, or would you want to be in, like, a situation of battling one or the other? Like, what is like, if I'm picking one, what is it referring to? Just who I like better?
That's what I was thinking. Like, which one would you like? You have to watch one for an episode. Would you rather watch like the human from the SG-1 or from Atlantis?
Okay. Yeah, I think I would pick from SG-1,
Mm-hmm.
because I do just like I really like, Fifth.
Fifth, yeah.
And, that was, like, one of my favorite ones, so yeah, I'd pick them, the SG-1
Got.
ones. How about you?
I mean, that one's also really tough because like I really like. I mean, I think there's the simplicity of the SG-1 ones, and then there's the simplicity of their relationship with the like Fifth has this sort of feelings for Sam, and it's in a way very like the subtle simplicity of it. Um, I think the Atlantis ones, they have a more developed situation, like, in terms of their like, the human network of them, it's more developed, and they have a more developed, like, sort of society or
Mhm.
whatever. But I would probably pick the SG-1 ones too,
Mhm.
just because I kind of am always about that sort of, like, subtle simplicity, and, I feel like then sometimes the things have more impact. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely. Let's see, my next one, and this is my last one that I've written down at least. I know you have more than I do. So would you rather okay, so I have to explain mine before I say it. So, um, remember in the Atlantis episode with McKay, how they had that thing happen where his consciousness and then the lady's consciousness were in his body?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, would you rather have Felger's consciousness and your consciousness combined and you're in his body, or would you rather have your consciousness and Coombs, but you're in Coombs' body? Which one would like you would have to be in their body, your consciousness is in their body along with theirs.
Oh my god. Okay, hang on though. You know what I would pick? Honestly, I think I would pick Coombs
Yeah.
because between the two of them, I feel like Felger's like outwardly there, but I feel like in terms of a scientist, I just get the gut feeling that Coombs is more competent. Plus, he watches Stargate, right? And like has a cat. So then like if
Oh,
I was
Star
felt
Trek?
or Star Trek, yeah, he watches Star Trek. Like, right? And has a cat. So like I could just go home and watch my sci-fi and have my cat and be my like a scientist. And I think like Felger, he has this like fanboy thing, and I wouldn't want to deal with that. Like I'm not like the fanboy type. I would be very horrified if my consciousness dragged me up to somebody and went, "Oh my God, you're like so amazing. I can't believe I'm talking to you."
I don't know, for some reason I would choose Felger. Like
But see, that's perfect because then your consciousness could be in Felger and my consciousness could be in Coombs. And then it would be the
yeah.
same, right? Like now,
Yeah.
except that we'd also be Felger and Coombs. We could be doing this podcast right now, except instead of seeing me and you, like we'd see Coombs and Felger.
See, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I think it's just like I love like the dorkiness of Felger and like the awkwardness, and I think that would be hilarious to kind of be stuck in that body, but then I also feel like, like with either one of them, they're scientists, right? So I could learn a lot from either one of them. Um, but like in terms of like just helping Felger kinda get out of his awkwardness, I could take over his body and just go, like, make him do something that he wouldn't go do, you know? Or, like, it's like, wasn't he the one that, like, he would be, like, really awkward if he was, like, talking to, like, his crushes and stuff, like, I
Yeah,
think
like
that
Carter.
yeah, that'd just be really funny to witness, but yeah, so,
Hmm.
anyhow.
But see, that works. It's perfect. Like that if you were Felger and I was Coombs, it would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so we'd be the Felger and Coombs podcast.
Hmm. Maybe next time I should dress up like Coombs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We should do that sometime for like a Halloween special where we dress up like that.
Yeah, and be like, hey, the what do they call them? The other guys. The other guys. So how about I give one more and
Okay.
then I'll do one more and I'll try and okay. Okay, here I'll end with like a light, fun one. Would you rather be stationed on Stargate Command or on Atlantis?
Oh, that's a tricky one because I think it would be amazing to go to Atlantis. Like that just seems like that would be really cool. But then at the same time, if you think about actually being stuck there, and initially at least, and not being able to like initially in the beginning at least being able to contact family, and then you have the wraith, and it's like the wraith are far more terrifying than some of the stuff on earth. Maybe for that reason I would pick on Earth, it's Stargate Command.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, I find it very tough because I think on the one hand, it would be super cool to be stationed at Stargate Command because you would be in charge of having to save your own planet, basically. Like
Mhm.
you would be in charge of saving your own planet. But if you went to Atlantis, you would still be in charge of saving your own planet and other planets, and it's sort of an extended way because you're researching all this ancient technology. So it's also kind of hard for me to say which I would pick. Maybe in the end I would lean towards Atlantis just because I
Mhm.
think it like I mean being a person that's really into history, it's like the ultimate history. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like that part of it would be really, really appealing to me.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Plus, now that they have that intergalactic bridge or whatever, then
Yeah.
you can just like pop home and say hi to everybody you like, and then go back to Atlantis, and then um,
Yeah.
people can even come visit you on Atlantis.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yeah, it's a tough one, I think, with that one because I think it would be really cool to be in Atlantis. But like, if I'm
But
really
yeah, I get like
thinking,
the Wraith.
yeah, yeah, that would be like I love the Wraith. I would love to become a Wraith, have a makeup artist make me into a Wraith. But in terms of like if I actually was living in a a real situation where I those things could come at me and suck my life, suck the life out of me, um, like that would be terrifying. Like imagine if that really existed. Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So no, no, no. Oh my gosh. So yeah, that like concludes our like final season 1 episode. Um and yeah, I mean, I guess like, it'd be great to hear like people's like thoughts on like, also even with our would you rather questions, you could even answer like what you would rather and why, like in the comments. That would be cool to hear about. And yeah, if you have any ideas of what you want us to cover in season 2, like that would also be cool to hear about as well. Like if there's any specific like things you want us to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we would love to hear from you if there's something that is very interesting or that you didn't feel we covered or just burning questions you have. Um, let us know. And also, I'm curious to hear what other people found most remarkable or things that they feel um, could have been enhanced more or that surprised them or that just looking back at SG-1 really made you feel a different way. Just, let us know in the comments. Were there also characters you thought could have been given more time or maybe characters that you were really, really glad that their arc ended?